Hey guys, this is miicrow. I wanted to give an update on the gear economy for New World, where it stands and where I would like it to go moving forward. This homepage for New World Database really suggests kind of what most of the problems are at a face value. There are pieces that are considered to be best in slot right now for certain builds, both for PvE and for PvP, that are not easily obtainable, and because they're not easily obtainable, it is leading to a lot of either burnout, which is like partially to blame gamers, I think, for just over grinding content. Like I think that's a fair criticism of that, but it's also just partially just the scarcity of resources doesn't make sense for the level of resource they are. For example, health, which is replacing with the resilient craft mod from last patch, which is was fundamental for PvP, is now the second best PvE perk and the best PvP perk to have on a general piece of armor when it comes to increasing how much you're able to live versus opponents. And this piece is extremely hard to find. It only drops from armoring materials, uh, the attribute crates, and from the PvP reward track. So it's extremely hard to find. This is running 50 to 75k, and it doesn't make sense for that when you consider Resilient in the past is buyable from the faction shop at a very low gold price of around like a 50 gold each, like in that like kind of range, 25 to 15 gold each, and some tokens. Like it just does not make sense. And I think some of this stuff needs to be looked at. Most of the stuff is kind of bugs, but I want to get into artifacts at the end here. Like we also have mithril stuff, which is not naturally able to roll your actual weapon perks from them. If you actually get like a flail from the wild, you're not going to be able to get a weapon perk on here, like Smite, for example, which is driving at the price of flails, and it just doesn't make sense. Like it's just like kind of QA stuff that should have been looked at that has not been looked at. And then the more big problem I think is when it comes to artifacts when it comes to gear progression right now. So we have must have perks from armor that aren't present. We have weapons that are just functionally not droppable from PvE content and have to be rolled, and we have artifacts which are more or less best in slot for certain builds and are more or less must-haves for certain builds, which is something that they've said that they're moving away towards, but it seems like even though the artifacts are supposed to boost certain playstyles due to the limited number of them and due to artifacts having an extra special perk, which often has great benefits to certain people in certain classes, that they are must-have perks. And when these artifacts have drop rates that are supposed to be around 10%, we start running into a lot of issues. I am, I think, infamous along with Chun now for being one of the people who grinded Tempest 35 times and was not able to actually get the magnetic gloves, and the Blood Drinker was the same week. So you have a decision from like a grinding perspective, especially from a timed event like the mutations where you have 35 runs. Where do I put these 35 runs? Do I try to get Blood Drinker? Do I try to get mag gloves? Like I can only get one of them, right? And you have to prioritize based off of that, which is limiting the content that you have on top of a very low drop rate. The actual drop rate for Blood Drinker itself was said to be around 10% from the devs. So based off of that, we're able to calculate how likely you are to get this at a certain point, but you'll notice that it's never guaranteed. There's no mutation like material that you can use to craft these, even though they drop from a mutation. There's no like increased odds mechanics if you don't get it right away. So you end up with like weird situations where people who are never going to use an artifact that get it right away, and people that really want an artifact never getting it, and it's very, very frustrating from a person who probably spent 30 minutes per dungeon run on average times like 35 runs, and you get the idea of like how much time I spent on this. It's just like a very, very significant amount of time to not get it is very frustrating. I originally made a dev post about this for Chun because Chun also had the same problem where he was not able to get it, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people as well who powered through 35 runs on one account and you were not able to get it, which is around a 2.5% chance to not being able to get the artifact at that point, and this is incredibly frustrating and it doesn't really make sense for a time-based event. There's another side of this token too, where you have artifacts like the Abyss, which are farmable but are very, very painful to farm from doing major corrupted portals above, I believe, 65. So you have to go to Merkguard at that point. There's like a timed event they have to keep doing rounds and rounds and rounds of, and people are spending days on this, but at least it's not time gapped by when mutations rotate themselves. So there's a sense of you can kind of get it whenever you want. You just have to put in the grind to get it, which is a little bit different than Mag Gloves and Blood Drinker, but I would still like to see that you were able to get these artifacts at a certain point within a reasonable period of time. If you compare this to Heart Runes, which are should be a similar like power spike in terms of character progression, from like a logical standpoint. Like you're getting an extra perk here. It has a unique ability. Heart Rune is like literally an extra ability that you're getting over time. That's an ultimate. So both of them are like very powerful. The Heart Runes themselves you were able to upgrade like the artifacts, but they dropped guaranteed on the first try. I do not see why the artifacts themselves not necessarily drop guarantee on the first try, but like maybe drop within the first 10 times, I think would be like fairly reasonable. That wouldn't be like overkilling it for most people. Like if you had a week to try to do 10 Tempest runs M1 through M3, you probably could do that even if you were relatively busy that week with like jobs and whatnot. But being able to put in the grind to do it like 35 times in a week, I don't think is very healthy from a community standpoint. To kind of encourage that behavior, because if you don't get it within this 1 week, for example, you have to wait another 5 weeks to get the artifact, which is just not very fun progression wise. So it's like something that you have to kind of balance there, and I'm kind of disappointed with how that has been handled. There's also artifacts that are on the PvP track that have a similar problem, like Ankh right now. I think Ankh is going to get heavily nerfed tomorrow, so not going to talk about this one too much in depth, but I imagine it will be very prevalent still after the patch because the other artifacts quite simply just aren't as strong power-wise comparatively on the jewelry slot. But if you have an artifact that is PvP reward track bound, PvEers have to be able to get this content. And the best way in order to actually farm these artifacts right now is to do 3v3s with premades, which is kind of limiting in terms of a PvE content wise. Like if you're a player that doesn't like the PvE or like to PvP a ton and you want like per se the Ankh, or if you want something else, for example, it's very, very good in PvP or sorry, in PvE. Serenity is a very, very good PvE weapon, but you have to be able to farm that from PvP as well. So you're kind of left in the spot where you're playing content that you don't necessarily want to play with on in modes that don't encourage you to get your artifact as quickly as possible. So if I'm strictly a PvP player, I don't want to have to do 35 runs of Tempest just to not get my magnetic gloves, which I'm still salty about and will probably be salty about for a while. But if I'm like a PvEer and I want to try to get Serenity to try to do those M3s as fast as possible, and I'm not able to get that quickly, and I've spent 40 to 50 PvP track runs and I'm not able to get this artifact, that's also like very, very annoying to deal with. And there's people that have done that, and I've heard those like kind of stories kind of being shared, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed in the near future, and there needs to be a way to kind of get artifacts relatively simpler than the current standpoint, and it shouldn't just be RNG. And the reason why I think that is because some of these artifacts are just best in slot. Serenity, for example, is like sort of like the Gallahorn of Destiny 2 when it comes to PvE during weeks and where there is silence prevalent. It just does the most DPS for those weeks itself, and whether Serenity should be nerfed according to that so that other weapons are on a similar power level, or whether there should be more artifacts that are kind of buffed to beat at Serenity's power level is up to debate. But at the end of the day, artifacts should not be kept as this kind of like SS tier class. Like if you don't have this artifact, you can't play kind of thing. If they are not easily obtainable, in my opinion, they should be something that is like relatively common to get, but maybe harder to level in terms of challenges, which are already prevalent. Like you have to be able to get through your 3 missions per artifact, and you have to be able to upgrade them, which are both very expensive because every upgrade costs 500 dark matter. And I would like them to see like lift or reduce that barrier so people have the option to go whatever build that they want to go, but still have to put in the grind to actually finish up that artifact, if that makes sense. Let me know if you guys think if you've had the similar experiences or if you're one of those people that got it on artifacts on the first try, but I think that this needs to be like looked at and kind of reworked, as well as some of the other QA issues need to be addressed. Like Adamant needs to be dropping somewhere. It doesn't make sense why it's not dropping anywhere. And Flails probably should be rolling weapon perks. Some of this stuff might be addressed in the patch notes tomorrow, and if it is, I am sorry I'm a day early. But I still think the artifact issue will persist no matter what, and there needs to be a better system so that you're not left trying to get an artifact that you want for your build. You don't get it that week, and then you have to wait another 5 weeks in order to try to get it again. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video.